You're out. Don't come back. We're moving on without you. That was my mother's voice. Flat, cold, and extremely practical on a voicemail she left while I was driving home from my dental clinic. No hesitation, no wound ring, just a brief recording that erased 7 years of being the daughter who clipped coupons, worked double shifts, and funded the entire family trust so she wouldn't worry. I listened to it once, then I texted back one word. Okay. What my mother and brother didn't know was that okay wasn't defeat. It was the green light to stop being their financial shield forever. Within hours, the trust account was frozen, the $2.4 million house deal was dead, and their fancy real estate lawyer was panicking. 46 missed calls by morning, and an email warning me that we had a serious problem. I laughed out loud in my kitchen. Before I go on, if this story speaks to you, take a second to hit like and subscribe, and drop your location and local time in the comments. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Tuesday, October 14th, 2023. I stood on the welcome mat outside my front door in Denver, my hand wrapped around a cold brass key. But I didn't turn it right away. My thumbs ached. After 8 hours of gripping tiny metal tools, scraping plaque off molars, and carefully navigating the sensitive gums of 12 different strangers, the muscles in my hands felt like tightly wound rubber bands. Being a dental hygienist teaches you a lot about human nature. People sit in my chair, open their mouths and close their eyes. They can't speak, so they can't lie. I spend my days looking closely at the things people try to hide. I know that a perfectly white, shiny porcelain crown can easily cover a rotting, infected root. You just have to know where to tap. I pushed the door open. My apartment was quiet, exactly as I had left it at 7 this morning. The familiar hum of the refrigerator greeted me. I dropped my keys into the ceramic bowl on the counter, the sharp clink echoing in the small kitchen. I didn't turn on the main lights, letting the soft gray evening light filter through the window blinds. My eyes moved straight to the oak dining table. It was completely covered in thick blue folders, the closing documents. For the past 9 months, my life had been consumed by a massive, 4-bedroom property in Cherry Creek. It was a beautiful house with a wraparound porch and a huge backyard. But it wasn't just a house. It was the final piece of the Sterling family trust. When my father passed away in the winter of 2019, he left behind a modest life insurance policy and a whole lot of confusion. My mother, Cressida, had never balanced a checkbook in her life. My older brother, Kalen, had grand ideas for businesses that always seemed to fail within 6 months. So, the responsibility fell to me. I was the quiet one, the one with the steady, unglamorous job that banks trusted. I spent the last 7 years slowly growing that small sum, clipping coupons, working overtime, and managing the trust account so that my family could have a secure future. I walked over to the table and ran my fingers over the top folder. The closing date was set for this coming Friday. The plan was simple. The trust would buy the house, Mom would live on the main floor, and Kalen would take the basement suite to run his new marketing firm. I was staying right here in my apartment, but I would legally own the property as the trustee. I was the safety net. My cell phone buzzed in the pocket of my scrub jacket. The screen flashed. Kalen. I took a slow breath, letting the smell of peppermint and latex that always clung to my clothes wash over me, and answered. Hey, Kalen. Tamsin, finally. His voice came through the speaker, fast and overly cheerful. I called the clinic, but the receptionist said you were already gone. Did you sign the wire transfer forms yet? I pulled out a wooden chair and sat down, rubbing my forehead. I'm looking at them tonight, Kalen. The bank needs a clear 48 hours, so I'll authorize the transfer tomorrow morning. Everything is on schedule. Right, Kalen said, though I could hear the rapid tapping of his expensive leather shoes against a hardwood floor in the background. It was a nervous habit he had whenever he wasn't in total control. It's just that Mom is getting really stressed. You know how her blood pressure gets. We just want this finished. The seller's agent called today and asked if we could push the money through tonight. The seller's agent? I frowned, opening the top blue folder. Why are they calling you? The lawyer handles the escrow. I'm the primary contact. There was a half-second pause on the line, a tiny, almost unnoticeable gap in the conversation. Oh, they just had my number from the open house last month. No big deal. Just sign the papers tonight, Tamsin. Don't overthink everything like you always do. I'm not overthinking, Kalen. It's a $2.4 million transfer from Dad's trust. I am reading every single page. Kalen sighed, a heavy, dramatic sound designed to make me feel small. Fine, but do it tonight. Mom asked me to tell you she's picking out the paint colors for the kitchen. She's so happy, Tamsin. Don't ruin her mood with all the legal stuff, okay? Okay, I said softly. The line went dead. I set the phone down on the table. My mother's happiness was always the most fragile thing in the world, and it was always my job to protect it. I reached for my reading glasses and a yellow highlighter. I opened the thick stack of papers from the title company. Page 1, Standard Legal Terms. Page 2, Property Description. Page 3. I stopped, I blinked and adjusted my glasses, bringing the page closer to my face in the dim light. My heart did a strange, slow thump against my ribs. Under the section titled Title Holders, there was a change. For months, the drafts had clearly stated the property was to be held by the Sterling Family Trust, Tamsin Sterling, trustee. But on this final, official document, the one Kaylin was begging me to sign and fund tonight, my name was gone. Instead, the paper read, Cressida Sterling and Kaylin Sterling, joint tenants with right of survivorship. I sat frozen in the quiet apartment. The shiny porcelain crown was cracking, and for the first time, I was looking directly at the decay underneath. I stared at the thick black ink on page 3, Cressida Sterling and Kaylin Sterling, joint tenants. I still struggle to wrap my head around it. If you've ever been the one sacrificing everything only to be written out of the picture, why do they do it? Drop your take below. The paper felt suddenly heavy, like it was made of solid lead. The apartment was still completely silent, but a loud, high-pitched ringing started in my ears. I traced the letters of my brother's name with my fingernail. 7 years. I had spent 7 years clipping grocery coupons, skipping vacations, taking extra weekend shifts at Smiles Dental, and depositing every spare dollar into the Sterling Family Trust account at First Bank. I picked up my cell phone from the table. There was a little red circle on the voicemail icon. It had come in at 6:15 p.m., right when I was driving through the Eisenhower Tunnel, a notorious dead zone for cell service. The caller ID simply said, Mom. I tapped the screen and held the cold glass to my ear. Tamsin, my mother's voice filled the quiet kitchen. It wasn't her usual nervous, pleading tone. It was flat, cold, extremely practical. Kaylin said you submitted the final e-signatures for the bank. So, I'm just calling to tell you that we've decided to change the locks on the Cherry Creek house tomorrow morning. You don't need a key. You're out. Don't come back there. We're moving on without you. Kaylin needs the extra room for his business. And frankly, you just don't fit into our plans for this neighborhood. You have your little apartment. We'll take it from here. The message clicked off. Kaylin said you submitted the final e-signatures. I slowly lowered the phone. He thought the DocuSign email I opened during my lunch break was the wire release. It wasn't. It was just a preliminary disclosure form from High Altitude Title and Escrow. He had jumped the gun. He assumed a completed digital signature instantly and legally locked the funds out of my control. He told her the money was secured, and the very second they thought they had the $2,400,000, they cut the string. A memory hit me, sharp and bitter. December 12, 2019. Room 412 at Denver Health. The heart monitor beside my father's bed had been a steady, weak beep. I had sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair for 36 hours, feeding him crushed ice from a tiny plastic cup. Out in the hallway, through the cracked wooden door, I could hear Mom and Kaylin talking. They weren't talking about Dad's failing lungs. They were arguing over who got to sell his Ford F-150. When the life insurance check from Mutual of Omaha arrived 3 weeks later, they almost lost the entire amount to a fake real estate scam. That was why Dad made me the sole trustee before his heart finally stopped. He knew. I looked down at the closing papers again. They had secretly contacted the title agent, probably paid a fee, and amended the deed behind my back, assuming the trust money would just automatically flow into the seller's account by Friday. I picked up my phone. I opened my text messages. I found my mother's contact. My thumbs hovered over the digital keyboard. I didn't type a long paragraph. I didn't ask why. I didn't tell her how much it hurt. I typed 4 letters. Okay. I hit send. Then, I stood up. The familiar stiffness in my hands was completely gone. A strange, icy calm washed over my entire body. When you find deep, rotting decay in a tooth, you don't argue with it. You don't ask it why it ruined the enamel. You drill it out. I walked to my small desk in the corner of the living room and opened my laptop. The blue screen lit up my face in the dark. I typed in the web address for First Bank's commercial division. I entered my secure trustee ID. I typed in my password. The dashboard loaded. Current balance, $2,442 and $115.60. I navigated to the pending transfers tab. There it was. The scheduled wire for $2,400,000 to high-altitude title and escrow, set to auto-release tomorrow at 8 a.m. I moved the mouse. I clicked Cancel Transfer. A gray box popped up on the screen. Are you sure you want to cancel this transaction? I clicked yes. Next, I went to the advanced account settings. I scrolled down to the security section and clicked Lock Account, NNS Suspected Fraud. The screen refreshed instantly. A thick red banner appeared at the top of the web page. Account frozen. Please contact your branch administrator. I wasn't done. I opened my email and started a new message to Remilly Tate, the escrow officer. Subject: Cancellation of purchase, 402 Cherry Creek Drive. Remilly, as the sole authorized manager of the Sterling Family Trust, I am officially terminating the purchase agreement for the property listed above due to unauthorized alterations to the deed documents. The wire transfer has been canceled. Please dissolve the escrow immediately. I hit send. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was exactly 7:42 p.m. I closed the laptop with a soft click. I walked into my bathroom, turned on the shower, and let the burning hot water wash away the smell of the dental clinic. I made a cup of chamomile tea, got into bed, and set my alarm for 6 a.m. For the first time in 7 years, I slept through the entire night without waking up once. The morning sun hadn't even breached the Denver skyline when my alarm chirped at exactly 6 a.m. on Wednesday, October 15, 2023. I sat up. The apartment was chilly. I walked into the kitchen, my bare feet padding softly against the linoleum, and pressed the brew button on my small coffee maker. Only then did I pick up my cell phone from the counter. The screen was a solid wall of notifications. 46 missed calls, 38 of them were from Kaylin. 8 were from Mom. There were also 22 text messages, starting with question marks and ending in long, frantic paragraphs. I didn't read a single one. Instead, I opened my email. At the very top of my inbox was a message from Thaddeus Thorne, the expensive real estate lawyer Kaylin had hired. It was sent at 5:45 a.m. Olay for me. Subject: Urgent Anoashiguatamain Perm. Tamsin, Romilly Tate at High Altitude Title, just informed my office that the trust account is completely frozen and the wire transfer was blocked. Cressida is deeply distressed. Kaylin is pacing my waiting room. We have a serious problem. Call me immediately. I stood in my quiet kitchen, holding my warm mug of coffee. I read the words, "We have a serious problem," one more time. Then, a sound bubbled up in my chest. It started small, but within a second I threw my head back and laughed. It was a loud, full, uncontrollable laugh that echoed off my apartment walls. For years, I had walked on eggshells, terrified of making a mistake, terrified of upsetting them. Now, the worst had finally happened. They had thrown me away. But standing here, I didn't feel broken. I felt incredibly light. I set my coffee down, tapped the reply button on Thaddeus's email, and typed, "Thaddeus, the problem is entirely yours. The trust assets are secure. Do not contact me again unless it is through official legal mail." I hit send. Then, I turned my phone completely off, slipped it into my bag, and left for work. By 7:30 a.m., I was pulling into the parking lot of Smiles Dental on Colorado Boulevard. The clinic smelled like mint polish, sterile wipes, and warm wax. It was a smell that always grounded me. Dr. Eris, the senior dentist and owner of the practice, was already at the front desk reviewing charts. "Morning, Tamsin," Dr. Eris smiled, adjusting his glasses. "Mrs. Cresswell is your first patient. Deep cleaning. Room 3. "Good morning, Dr. Eris," I said, tying my hair back. "I'll get the tray set up." I spent the next 4 hours entirely focused on my hands. I scaled plaque, polished enamel, and adjusted the bright overhead light. I wore my blue surgical mask, hiding my face. I realized how much of my life was spent wearing a mask. The calm daughter, the helpful sister, the one who nodded and smiled while Kaylin took the credit, and Mom played the victim. Taking off that invisible mask this morning felt better than taking off the surgical one. At 12:15 p.m., the clinic paused for lunch. I sat in the small break room, unwrapped a turkey sandwich, and finally turned my phone back on. My voicemail inbox was completely full. I deleted Kaylin's frantic messages without listening, but one number caught my eye. It was Aunt Elowen, Mom's younger sister. Aunt Elowen lived in Florida, but she always knew everything that happened in our family within 5 minutes. She was the family gossip, the peacekeeper who always demanded that I be the one to keep the peace. I put the phone to my ear. "Tamsin, sweetie." Aunt Elowen's voice poured out, dripping with that fake, sugary concern she always used. "Your mother called me in tears. Absolute tears. Kaylin's ulcer is acting up because of the stress you're causing. Honey, why are you being so difficult about this house? You know your brother needs that basement for his firm. He worked so hard to get his friend Darian to help fix the deed so it would be easier for your mom. I stopped chewing. I pressed the phone tighter against my ear. Darian really bent the rules at his office to push that amendment through quietly so you wouldn't have to worry about the paperwork. Aunt Elowen continued, her voice turning sharp and scolding. And this is how you thank them? By throwing a tantrum and locking the money? Unfreeze the account, Tamsin. Family is family. The voicemail ended. The break room was silent except for the hum of the vending machine. His friend Darian. My mind raced back to last summer. Kaylin's college buddy, Darian Shaw. Darian worked as a senior loan officer at Apex Financial. Kaylin had bragged about playing golf with him. The pieces clicked together in my head. A title company like High Altitude wouldn't just change a legal deed on a multi-million-dollar trust purchase because Kaylin asked nicely. It required a verified signature from the trustee, me. But if Kaylin had Darian at Apex Financial forge a bank release, manipulate the electronic signature logs, and bypass the mandatory e-notary verification, they hadn't just made a greedy mistake. They had committed federal wire fraud. My mother and brother thought they were playing a simple family game of favorites. They didn't realize they had just walked into a very real, very dangerous legal trap, and they had left their fingerprints everywhere. I took a slow bite of my sandwich. The game had completely changed. I threw the empty sandwich wrapper into the break room trash can. It was 12:50 p.m. My lunch break was almost over. I stood by the small window, looking out at the busy traffic on Colorado Boulevard. Darian Shaw, Apex Financial. The names played in my head like a song stuck on repeat. I walked back out to the main clinic floor. The bright overhead fluorescent lights buzzed softly. I stopped at the front desk. Alara, our office manager, was typing fast on her keyboard. Alara was 28, wore bright red lipstick, and spent 8 hours a day fighting with giant dental insurance companies. If an insurance agent tried to deny a claim, Alara would dig through 10 years of paperwork just to prove them wrong. She was fearless. "Hey, Alara," I said quietly, leaning against the tall counter. She didn't look up from her screen. "Hey, Tamsin, your 1 o'clock patient is running 5 minutes late. You have time to grab a water." "Actually, I have a weird question," I said. I kept my voice low so Dr. Won's heiress wouldn't hear from the hallway. When an insurance company claims a patient never signed their treatment consent form online, how do you prove that they actually did? Alara finally stopped typing. She spun her chair around and looked at me. I pulled the digital audit trail. Any electronic signature program like DocuSign creates a certificate of completion. It's a permanent record. It shows the exact time the document was opened, the device used, and the IP address of the computer that signed it. Why? You got a patient trying to get out of paying for a root canal? Venendum Mustio Bemangbaita lied smoothly. How hard is it to get that certificate? Wado munda bashwin fitinen on the mound. In smim matusham tuna line main bed bikamanan and sit pizza above it in pion pin tu kinsaf. It generates a PDF automatically. You can't fake it. It's tracked by computer servers, not humans. When under damaman pito mananamun umpin pin pitu pion samlet and dumpabanan send down bunny pumpin to bumps and sing pinburn down bana. There was a new text message. It wasn't from Kaylin. It was from a group chat Mom had just created. The group included Aunt Elowen, my cousin Kale in Ohio, and my grandmother. Mom's message read, "Dear family, I am writing this with a heavy, broken heart. As you know, Kaylin and I were supposed to move into our new home this Friday. Sadly, Tamsin has suffered some kind of sudden mental breakdown. She locked the family trust account this morning and canceled the house purchase for no reason. Kaylin is currently at urgent care because the stress made his stomach ulcer flare up. Please pray for Tamsin. We think the pressure of her job is making her act out in cruel ways. We are giving her space and will not be speaking to her until she gets professional help." I stared at the glowing screen. A cold, hard lump formed in my throat. She was spinning the story. She was building a wall around herself and Kaylin, painting them as innocent victims and painting me as the crazy, jealous sister. By tomorrow, the whole extended family would look at me with pity and disgust. She cared more about what Cousin Kale thought than the fact that she had just made me homeless in her version of the future. I didn't type back. I didn't defend myself to the group chat. Words wouldn't help me here. Only paper would. I opened my email app. I found the DocuSign link that Kaylin had forwarded to me 2 weeks ago. The one he told me was just a preliminary disclosure form for the title company. At the time I had clicked it, read the first page, and signed it, trusting my brother. I tapped the link. The document loaded on my small phone screen. Following Alara's advice, I scrolled all the way to the bottom and clicked a tiny gray button that said View Certificate of Completion. A new PDF loaded. My eyes scanned the tiny text. I found my signature stamp. Next to it was the time. October 1, 2023, 12:30 p.m. That matched. I was on my lunch break that day. But then I scrolled down to the third page. The page where the deed was secretly changed to list Cressida and Kaylin as the only owners. There was a second digital signature stamp next to the change. It had my name typed out, but the details below it made my heart race. Date signed, October 13th, 2023, 4:15 p.m. IP address, 192.168.145. Location, Apex Financial Corporate Network, Denver, CO. Yesterday afternoon, while I was cleaning teeth in room 3, someone sitting at a computer inside Darian Shaw's office at Apex Financial had forged my digital initials to approve the new deed. I took a screenshot of the certificate. Then I took another one. I didn't feel sad anymore. The silent, heavy grief that had lived in my chest since Dad died was entirely gone. They thought I was just the quiet girl who cleaned teeth and paid the bills. They thought they could just erase me from the paperwork and tell the family I went crazy. Tamsin, Dr. Eris's voice called from the hallway. Mr. Huxley is ready for you. Coming, Dr. Eris. I called back. I slipped my phone into my pocket. I put on my blue mask, snapped my rubber gloves over my wrists, and walked out to greet my patient. My hands were perfectly steady. I had the dots. Now I just had to connect them in a way that would bring the whole fake house down. Thursday, October 16th, 2023. 2 days after my mother's voicemail. I woke up to something I hadn't experienced in 7 years. Total silence. My phone, usually buzzing with my mother's complaints about the weather or Kaylin's demands for bank passwords, sat quietly on the nightstand. The family group chat was dead. I had been officially erased. They were giving me space, which was their polite, public way of saying they had locked the door and thrown away the key. I made my coffee, watching the dark liquid drip into the glass pot. The exile felt heavy, like a thick wool blanket over my shoulders. I had spent my whole adult life trying to be the glue holding my family together. Now, standing alone in my kitchen, I realized the glue was the only thing breaking. I got to Smiles Dental at 7:15 a.m. At 5:30 p.m., the last patient left. Dr. Eris locked the main doors and waved goodbye. I stayed behind in the break room. Alara was still at her desk, loudly fighting with a printer jam. I walked up to the front desk and laid my phone down on her keyboard. The screen showed the DocuSign certificate I had found yesterday. Alara, I said, my voice steady. I need your help. Not as a friend, as the person who tracks down missing money for a living. Alara stopped pulling at the jammed paper. She wiped her hands on her jeans and looked at the screen. She zoomed in on the IP address and the timestamp. October 13th, 2023, 4:15 p.m., Apex Financial Corporate Network. Her eyes narrowed. The playful office manager disappeared, and the bulldog came out. Who forged your initials, Tamsin? She asked, her voice dropping to a serious whisper. My brother, Kaylin, with the help of his friend, a loan officer at Apex Financial named Darian Shaw. They changed the deed on a $2.4 million house to cut me out, and tried to use my digital signature along with a fraudulent e-notary seal to release the trust funds to the seller. Alara let out a long, slow whistle. She leaned back in her rolling chair. Wow. That is incredibly stupid. Do they know that IP addresses are permanently logged on banking servers? Kaylin thinks he's the smartest guy in every room, I said, pulling up a stool beside her. He thinks because I clean teeth I don't read the fine print. I stopped the wire transfer. The money is frozen, but my mother sent a message to the whole family saying I had a mental breakdown. Kaylin hired a fancy real estate lawyer named Thaddeus Thorne. They are going to try to force me out legally by claiming I'm unfit to be the trustee. Alara crossed her arms. So, we fight back. We go to the police. No, I said quickly. If I go to the police now, it turns into a messy he said she said family dispute. The cops will say it's a civil matter. Kaylin will cry to his lawyer, Mom will play the sick, heartbroken widow, and I'll look like the crazy sister. I need a paper trail so solid that Thaddeus Thorne has to drop them as clients, and the bank permanently flags Kaylin. Alara tapped her red fingernails on the desk. A slow smile spread across her face. You know Leander, right? She asked. I nodded. Leander Holt was an independent forensic accountant. He rented the small, windowless office right next door to our dental clinic. He came in for teeth cleanings twice a year. He drank too much black coffee and always had ink stains on his cuffs. He spent his days investigating corporate embezzlement and insurance fraud. Leander owes me a massive favor, Alara said, grabbing her keys. I spent 4 hours on the phone last month getting his root canal covered by his terrible insurance. Grab your laptop, we are going next door. 5 minutes later, we were sitting in Leander's cramped office. It smelled like old paper, stale espresso, and dust. The walls were lined with heavy cardboard boxes. Leander, a tall man with thinning gray hair and tired eyes, was looking closely at my laptop screen. He didn't say a word for a full 3 minutes. He just scrolled through the DocuSign certificate, the cancelled First Bank wire receipt, and the threatening email from Kaylin's lawyer, Thaddeus Thorne. Finally, Leander took off his reading glasses and rubbed his eyes. "Tamsin," Leander said, his voice deep and gravelly. "This isn't just a family disagreement over a house. Under federal banking laws, using a financial institution's network, like Apex Financial, to falsify a title document and forge a notary seal for a transaction over $500,000 is Class C wire fraud." "I know," I said, my hands resting flat on my knees. "Your brother left a digital footprint the size of a dinosaur," Leander continued, pulling a yellow legal pad toward him. "But you are right to avoid the police for now. White-collar crimes require perfect documentation before the authorities will even look at them. If we scare them too early, Darian Shaw will just delete the server logs at Apex Financial to save his own job." "So, what do we do?" Alara asked, leaning forward. "We build a trap," Leander said, clicking his pen. "Tamsin, you are the legal trustee. You hold all the actual power. They are trying to panic you into stepping down. We need to let them think they are winning. We need Kaylin to put his demands in writing. We need him to accidentally admit that he worked with Darian to change the document." Leander looked right at me. "Are you ready to play a very cold game of chess against your own mother and brother? Because once we start this, you can't back out. The family you knew is gone." I thought about the dark, quiet apartment. I thought about the 7 years of coupon clipping. I thought about my mother's flat, cold voice on the voicemail. "They were gone a long time ago, Leander," I said softly. "Tell me what to do." Friday, October 17th, 2023. Today was supposed to be the closing day for the Cherry Creek house. At 9 a.m., I was in room 2, holding a saliva ejector in a patient's mouth while Dr. Eris carefully filled a cavity. The clinic radio was playing a soft pop song. Outside the window, the morning frost was melting off the parked cars. It was a perfectly normal Friday, but in the quiet space behind my surgical mask, my mind was running like a high-speed engine. At exactly 1 p.m., I washed my hands, dried them on a paper towel, and walked straight through the back door of the clinic into the adjoining hallway. Leander had left his office door cracked open for me. When I walked in, Alara was already there, eating a salad out of a plastic container. Leander was standing by a whiteboard he had wiped clean. On the center of the white surface, he had taped a single piece of paper. It was a printed copy of a commercial loan application. "Sit down, Tamsin," Leander said, taking a sip from a styrofoam cup of coffee. He pointed the end of his red dry erase marker at the paper. "In financial investigations, the first question is never how they did it. It's why. Why risk federal wire fraud just to take your name off a deed when you were already letting them live in the house for free?" I sat on the edge of the leather sofa. Because my mother wanted total control. She didn't want to ask my permission to paint the kitchen. "No," Leander said gently. "People don't forge digital signatures over paint colors." He pulled the paper off the board and handed it to me. The letterhead read, "Apex Financial, minus Commercial Lending Division." The date at the top was August 12th, 2023, 2 full months ago. I scanned the typed boxes. Applicant, Kaylin Sterling. Business name, Zenith Marketing LLC. Requested line of credit, $250,000. Collateral offered, 402 Cherry Creek Drive. My breath caught in my throat. I looked up at Leander, then at Alara, who had stopped chewing her salad. "Underwriter on the file is Darian Shaw," Leander explained, his voice low and steady. "Kaylin's business is failing, Tamsin. He has zero cash flow. He applied for a $250,000 loan back in August to keep his lifestyle afloat. He used the Cherry Creek house as collateral before the trust even bought it. But he couldn't do that," I whispered, staring at my brother's signature at the bottom of the page. "The house was going to be owned by the trust. I am the trustee. The bank would never allow a lien on a trust property without my explicit notarized consent." Exactly, Leander said. He sat down heavily in his desk chair. And they knew you would never sign off on leveraging Dad's life insurance money for Kaylin's fake marketing company. So, they hatched a plan. Your mother agreed to it. They used Darian to alter the closing documents at the last second, removing the trust entirely. If the deed said Cressida and Kaylin could legally pledge the house to Apex Financial the very next day. I stared at the paper. The cold realization spread through my chest, freezing my veins. The voicemail from my mother. We're moving on without you. You don't fit into our plans. It wasn't just a cruel emotional rejection. It was a calculated financial execution. They had spent months smiling at me, letting me manage the escrow, letting me clip my coupons and work double shifts, all while secretly planning to use the house as an ATM the moment the ink dried. Are you okay? Alara asked softly, placing a hand on my shoulder. I took a slow, deep breath. The faint smell of stale espresso in the room grounded me. I'm fine. What's the next move? Leander spun his computer monitor toward me. He had a blank email drafted, addressed to Thaddeus Thorne and CC'd to Kaylin. We bait the hook, Leander said. First Bank's fraud department officially locked the trust account. We use that. You are going to write to them, playing the panicked, overwhelmed sister. You tell them you are terrified of getting in trouble with the bank. I pulled my chair closer to the keyboard and started typing exactly what Leander dictated. Thaddeus. First Bank's fraud division has frozen the trust and my personal accounts. The bank manager is asking for a formal written explanation regarding the DocuSign certificate from October 13th generated at Apex Financial. I don't understand how my signature got on that third page. Please just tell me what happened so I can explain it to the bank and get the funds unfrozen. I don't want to fight anymore. I just want this over. I read it twice. It sounded exactly like the old Tamsin. Weak, accommodating, desperate for peace. Send it, Alara said. I clicked send. The rest of the afternoon was agonizing. I went back to the clinic, cleaned teeth, and smiled at patients, but my phone felt like a hot coal in my pocket. Every time it vibrated, my pulse jumped. At 4:45 p.m., I was wiping down a dental chair when the notification finally popped up on my screen. It wasn't from the lawyer, Thaddeus Thorne. Thaddeus was too smart to put a confession in writing. The reply was directly from Kaylin. I opened the email. My eyes scanned his hurried, arrogant words. Tamsin, calm down and stop overreacting. Nobody is in trouble. Darian just pushed the button from his terminal at Apex to save us time because you were at work and Mom was getting anxious about the closing deadline. It was a shortcut, not fraud. Tell the bank it was authorized. Do it today before Mom's blood pressure spikes again. Don't make this a bigger deal than it is. I stood perfectly still in the empty, sterile clinic room. The overhead light hummed. He wrote it down. He admitted that a loan officer at a federal banking institution forged a signature on a real estate deed. He put it in plain text. I didn't reply. I just forwarded the email to Leander and Alara with a single sentence of my own. We have him. Monday, November 10th, 2023. Over 2 weeks had passed since I walked away from the Cherry Creek House deal. I stood in room 1 at the clinic, carefully draping a heavy, lid-lined apron over a patient's chest before taking her bite wing x-rays. I adjusted the heavy collar around her neck. For the first time in my life, I truly understood what that physical weight felt like. For 32 years I had worn an invisible lead apron, carrying the heavy burden of my mother's emotional needs and my brother's endless mistakes. Now that weight was gone. My phone sat on the counter, completely silent. I had blocked Kaylin, Mom, Aunt Elowen, and the entire family group chat. Sometimes, during my lunch breaks, I would open the hidden filtered messages folder just to see the timeline of their panic. They started with anger. Then came the guilt trips. Yesterday, my mother had sent a text that read, Tamsin, Thanksgiving is only a few weeks away. Kaylin's ulcer is worse. He is willing to forgive your little stunt if you just call the bank today. Don't ruin the holidays for us. He is willing to forgive me. I read the words, locked my screen, and threw the phone back into my purse. Not a single tear formed in my eyes. The girl who used to cry in her car after family dinners was gone. At 6 p.m., the clinic closed. I wiped down my tools, threw away my paper mask, and walked through the back hallway into Leander's office. The small room was warm, smelling of fresh printer ink and Alara's vanilla perfume. Alara was sitting on the edge of the leather sofa, holding a stack of neatly printed papers. Leander was standing behind his desk. Lined up in a perfect row on his green desk blotter were 3 thick brown manila envelopes. Everything is ready, Leander said, his voice quiet but sharp. He pointed to the first envelope. "We aren't going to the police, Tamsin. The police take months to investigate white-collar crime. By the time a detective even looks at your file, Kaylin will have found another way to steal the money. We are going to hit them where it actually hurts. The money." I stepped closer to the desk, looking at the typed mailing labels. "Envelope number 1, Leander explained, tapping the thickest package, "goes directly to the Chief Compliance Officer at Apex Financial's national headquarters in New York. It contains the DocuSign audit trail, showing the forged IP address, the altered deed, and Kaylin's printed email confessing that Darian Shaw pushed the button. Banks do not wait for police. The moment corporate compliance sees this, they will lock Darian out of the building. He will be fired and investigated by federal auditors within 48 hours. I looked at Alara. She gave me a small, firm nod. "Envelope number 2, Leander continued, moving his finger, "goes to the senior fraud investigator at First Bank. It officially clears you of any wrongdoing, secures the $2,400,000 back into your sole control, and permanently blacklists Kaylin Sterling and Zenith Marketing LLC from ever opening an account or securing a loan with them again." "And the third one?" I asked, looking at the final envelope. "The Colorado State Bar Association," Leander said, a small grim smile forming on his lips. "A formal ethics complaint against Thaddeus Thorne. He knew the deed was altered illegally, and he used his law license to try and intimidate you into releasing the funds anyway. Lawyers hate 2 things, losing their license and public embarrassment. He will drop your mother and brother as clients the second this lands on his desk." Leander held out a black ink pen. "I need your physical signature on all 3 cover letters. Once you sign these, the avalanche starts. You can't stop it." I took the pen. The plastic felt cold against my fingers. I looked around the small, dusty office. I looked at Leander, a tired accountant who stayed late just to help a girl he barely knew. I looked at Alara, who had spent her entire weekend digging through digital server logs just to protect me. My mother and brother shared my blood, but they had thrown me out the moment I stopped being useful to them. I bent over the desk. I didn't hesitate. I pressed the pen to the paper and signed my name in sharp, clean strokes. 1, 2, 3. Leander carefully folded the papers, slid them into the envelopes, and sealed them with a firm press of his thumb. "Let's go," Alara said, grabbing her coat. The 3 of us walked out of the building together. The Denver air was freezing, biting at my cheeks. The streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows across the dark pavement of Colorado Boulevard. We walked 1 block down to the corner. A blue United States Postal Service mailbox stood under a street lamp. Leander handed me the 3 heavy envelopes. I pulled down the squeaky metal handle of the mailbox. I looked at the envelopes one last time. Cressida Sterling and Kaylin Sterling. Joint tenants. They wanted to move on without me. Now they were going to have to. I pushed the envelopes into the dark slot and let go of the handle. Clang. The metal door snapped shut. The sound echoed loudly down the quiet street. The trap was set. Now we just had to wait for it to snap shut. Walking away from that mailbox, I wondered if I should have warned them first, given my mother one last call before alerting the federal authorities and shutting it all down. Part of me wanted to believe a warning might have changed things, but every attempt to help for 7 years ended with me paying for their mistakes. Would you have shown mercy, or would you have dropped those envelopes exactly like I did? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to know. Friday, November 6th, 2023, 2:14 p.m. The low hum of the ultrasonic scaler was the only sound in room 3. I was carefully washing away stubborn tartar from Mrs. Bixby's lower front teeth. My hands moved in tiny, practiced circles. Outside, a light flurry of snow danced past the clinic window, dusting the Colorado Boulevard pavement in a thin layer of white. My heart rate was a steady 60 beats per minute. For 4 days, the world had been perfectly quiet. No calls, no texts, just the rhythmic routine of my job. Then, the clinic's heavy glass front door opened. The electronic chime rang, a sharp ding-dong that echoed down the hallway. I didn't look up. I kept my focus on the tiny mirror in my hand. A minute later, Alara appeared in the doorway of room 3. She didn't have her usual bright smile. She held a stack of patient files tightly against her chest. She caught my eye over Mrs. Bixby's head and gave a tiny, almost invisible shake of her head. "Tamsin," Alara said softly, "when you are finished here, you need to come to the front desk. You have a walk-in." "I don't have any openings today, Alara," I replied, keeping my voice smooth. "He says it's a family emergency," she said. Her eyes were locked on mine. My hand stopped moving. I carefully set the metal scaler down on the paper tray. I took a slow breath, letting the smell of peppermint paste fill my lungs. Okay, I said. Give me 5 minutes. I finished polishing Mrs. Bixby's teeth, sat her up, and walked her to the checkout counter. Then, I turned toward the small waiting area. Kalen was pacing. The shiny, perfectly styled brother I knew was entirely gone. He wore a wrinkled gray dress shirt, half untucked from his slacks. His expensive leather shoes were scuffed with gray snowmelt. He looked pale, and his hands were constantly rubbing his face, pushing his hair in every direction. He stopped pacing when he saw me in my blue scrubs. "Tamsin," he breathed out, stepping forward. He reached out to grab my arm, but I took 1/2 step back. His hand fell to his side. "What are you doing here, Kalen? Dr. Aris doesn't like personal visits during clinic hours." "We need to talk," he whispered rapidly, his eyes darting toward Alara, who was pretending to type on her computer. "In private, now, please." I looked at him, really looked at him. There was no anger in my chest, just a cold, clear observation. He was terrified. "Room 4 is empty," I said, pointing down the hall. I walked ahead of him. The door clicked shut behind us, leaving us in a small, windowless room filled with boxes of latex gloves and sterilized mouth mirrors. Kalen didn't even sit down. He leaned against the counter, breathing heavily. "What did you do, Tamsin?" His voice cracked. He wasn't yelling. He sounded like a small boy who had just dropped a glass of milk on the floor. "What did you actually do?" "I went to work," I answered quietly. "I cleaned teeth. I paid my rent." "Don't play dumb with me," he hissed, his face flushing red. He squeezed his eyes shut and rubbed his temples. At 10 o'clock this morning, 2 men from Apex Financial Corporate Compliance walked into Darian's branch. They pulled him out of a meeting, packed his desk into a cardboard box, and escorted him out of the building. "His cell phone is disconnected." I folded my arms across my chest. I didn't say a word. I just let the silence stretch out, thick and heavy. "And that's not even the worst part," Kalen continued, his breathing getting faster. "An hour later, I tried to pay the server hosting fees for Zenith Marketing. My debit card was declined. I called First Bank. The branch manager told me my business accounts are entirely frozen pending a fraud review, and Zenith's line of credit has been terminated. They told me I have 14 days to pay back the $30,000 I already spent, or they are sending it to collections." He looked up at me, his eyes wide, searching my face for the soft, yielding sister who always fixed his messes. He was waiting for me to apologize. He was waiting for me to offer my own savings to cover his debt. "It sounds like you have a serious problem," I said. Kalen stared at me. The realization slowly crawled across his face. The mask I had worn for 32 years was gone, and he didn't recognize the woman standing in front of him. "You sent something to the banks," he whispered, his voice shaking. "Tamsin, you can't do this. Mom was crying all morning. She had to cancel the moving truck. The seller in Cherry Creek is threatening to sue us for breach of contract because the wire never arrived. Thaddeus Thorne won't even return my phone calls. You have to fix this." "Fix what?" I asked softly, tilting my head. "You changed the deed. You cut me out. Mom left me a voicemail saying you were moving on without me. I'm just respecting her wishes, Kalen. I'm moving on." "It was just a misunderstanding," he begged, taking a step closer. The smell of stale coffee and panicked sweat rolled off him. "We were just stressed about the closing. You know how Mom gets. You know she didn't mean it." "She meant it," I said. My voice was as flat and cold as a sheet of ice. "And you meant it. You forged a digital signature to steal our father's life insurance money so you could prop up a fake marketing company. You gambled the entire family trust on yourself. And you lost." I reached for the door handle. "Tamsin, please." Kalen grabbed the door frame, blocking my exit. His eyes were completely desperate now. "If the bank demands that $30,000 back, I'm ruined. Zenith is finished. I don't have it. Mom doesn't have it. She spent her last $10,000 on custom furniture for the new house. You are the trustee. You control the $2.4 million. You have to authorize a distribution to save us. Just $30,000. Please, we're family." I looked at his hand gripping the white doorframe. "You don't fit into my plans, Kalen," I said. I pulled the door open, forcing him to step back, and walked out into the bright hallway. I didn't look back. Wednesday, November 11th, 2023, 6:45 p.m. The automatic sliding doors of my apartment building opened with a slow, mechanical grind. The Denver evening air was freezing, and a thin layer of dirty snow lined the sidewalks. I stepped into the brightly lit lobby, carrying 2 heavy plastic grocery bags. The plastic handles dug deep into the cold, red skin of my fingers. I walked toward the elevator, keeping my head down, listening to the soft squeak of my rubber-soled shoes on the tile floor. "Tamsin." I stopped. The voice echoed slightly in the large, empty lobby. I didn't turn around immediately. I recognized the heavy floral scent of Chanel No. 5 hanging in the air, completely overpowering the building's cheap pine floor cleaner. I slowly turned. Sitting on the stiff leather lobby sofa was my mother, Cressida. Beside her sat Aunt Elowen, who had apparently flown in from Florida. My mother wore her expensive beige wool winter coat, perfectly buttoned. Her hair was flawlessly styled, not a single strand out of place. But when I looked closely at her face, the polished image cracked. The skin under her eyes was puffy and dark. Her knuckles were completely white as she gripped her leather purse on her lap. Aunt Elowen stood up first. She wore a forced, tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hello, sweetie," Aunt Elowen said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. She walked over and tried to place a hand on my shoulder, but I shifted my grocery bags, stepping out of her reach. "Your mother and I have been waiting for over an hour. We thought it was time for a real family talk, face to face. It's almost Thanksgiving, Tamsin." I stood my ground, feeling the cold air draft from the sliding doors behind me. "I don't have anything to say, Aunt Elowen." My mother finally stood up. She didn't smile. She walked slowly toward me, her heels clicking sharply against the hard floor. "You are going to listen to me," my mother said. Her voice was low, trembling with a mix of exhaustion and fury. "Do you have any idea what you have done? The seller in Cherry Creek officially canceled our contract yesterday. They kept our earnest money deposit. Kalen's business accounts are completely locked. His credit score is ruined. He can't even buy groceries." "I didn't do any of that, Mom," I said softly, looking directly into her eyes. "Kalen did that to himself when he forged my digital signature at Apex Financial." Aunt Elowen gasped softly, taking a half step back. "Forged? Cressida, what is she talking about? You told me on the phone that Tamsin just had a panic attack and locked the bank accounts." My mother's jaw tightened. A tiny muscle near her left eye twitched. She didn't look at her sister. She kept her burning gaze fixed on me. "Kalen is your brother," my mother hissed, ignoring Aunt Elowen completely. "He made a foolish mistake because he was under immense pressure. He was trying to build a future for us. He needed a business loan to keep Zenith Marketing afloat. The house was just collateral, Tamsin. It was just paper. If you had just stayed quiet and let the closing happen, nobody would have gotten hurt. He would have paid the loan back." I let out a slow, sharp breath. The plastic grocery bags felt heavier in my hands. "Did he tell you he applied for a $250,000 line of credit back in August?" I asked, keeping my voice perfectly calm and steady. "Before the trust even bought the house? Did he tell you that if his fake marketing company failed, the bank would have foreclosed on the property? You would have been homeless, Mom." "He wouldn't have failed," she snapped loudly, her voice echoing off the lobby walls. A man walking his dog stopped and stared, but my mother didn't care anymore. The public mask was finally falling off. "He just needed a chance that our father never gave him. You have a job, Tamsin. You clean teeth. You have a steady paycheck in this apartment. You didn't need that trust money. You never needed it the way Kalen did." The words hit me like a physical blow to the chest. You didn't need it. For 7 years I had skipped vacations. I had worked 6 days a week. I had worn cheap scrubs and driven a 12-year-old Honda Civic with a broken heater, carefully managing every single penny of my father's life insurance so that she would never have to worry about heating bills or property taxes. And in her mind, my sacrifice was just an excuse to give everything to Kalen. "Cressida," Aunt Elowen whispered, her eyes wide with shock. The family gossip suddenly realized she had backed the wrong horse. Forgery and federal wire fraud were not polite family secrets you could whisper about at a Sunday dinner. They were prison sentences. "You knew he tried to steal the trust money?" "It wasn't stealing," my mother shouted, turning on her sister. "It's family money. It belongs to us." I placed my grocery bag slowly on the cold tile floor. I pulled my phone out of my coat pocket. "The money belongs to the Sterling Family Trust," I said clearly. The absolute certainty in my own voice surprised even me. And as of yesterday morning, First Bank's legal department completed their internal review. The $2.4 million is entirely secured, but the bank has officially reported Kalen's forged loan application to the federal authorities. My mother's face drained of all color. She stared at me, her mouth slightly open, the anger instantly evaporating into pure, unfiltered terror. "Tamsin," she whispered, her hands shaking violently now, They'll arrest him. You have to call the bank. Tell them you authorized it, please. I am begging you as your mother. I picked up my grocery bags. I looked at the woman who had spent my entire life making me feel invisible. I can't do that, Mom, I said quietly. I'm just a dental hygienist. I don't fit into your plans anymore. I walked past them, pressed the elevator button, and stepped inside. The metal doors slid shut, cutting off the view of my mother collapsing onto the leather sofa. Wednesday, November 18, 2023, 9:30 a.m. A heavy gray snowstorm was burying downtown Denver, but inside the main corporate branch of First Bank, the air was warm and smelled strongly of lemon furniture polish. I sat in a heavy leather chair inside a glass-walled conference room. A cold glass of water sat on the mahogany table in front of me. I hadn't taken a single sip. Across from me sat Mr. Gentry, the bank's senior internal fraud investigator. He wore a crisp blue suit and had a stack of thick file folders neatly arranged on his desk. They are here, Ms. Sterling, Mr. Gentry said softly, looking over my shoulder. I didn't turn around right away. Through the reflection in the glass wall, I could see them stepping off the elevator. My mother and Kaylin, they weren't alone. Walking beside them was a short, sweaty man holding a cheap briefcase. He was their new lawyer. Just as Leander had predicted, Thaddeus Thorne had dropped them the exact same day the ethics complaint hit his desk. They had begged the bank for this mediation meeting. Kaylin's new lawyer claimed they had new evidence that the whole thing was a simple family misunderstanding. The bank only agreed to the meeting to officially close their internal review before handing the final file over to the federal authorities. The conference room door opened. Kaylin walked in first. The sight of him was jarring. The perfectly styled hair was greasy and flat. His expensive coat looked loose, like he had lost 10 pounds in 3 weeks. My mother walked in behind him, staring at the floor, clutching her purse so tightly her fingers were completely white. They sat down on the opposite side of the long wooden table. They didn't look at me. "Let's make this quick," Mr. Gentry said, not bothering to smile. He opened his master file. "Mr. Sterling, your legal counsel stated you have proof that your sister gave verbal consent to alter the trust deed and pledge the property for your commercial loan." The new lawyer cleared his throat. He pulled out a single sheet of paper. "Yes, we have a signed affidavit from Cressida Sterling, stating that Tamsin Sterling agreed to step down as trustee during a family dinner on October 1st. Therefore, Kaylin Sterling acted in good faith." I sat perfectly still. My mother, the woman who used to read me bedtime stories, had signed a fake legal document to protect the son who was destroying us all. She was willing to commit perjury to save him. Mr. Gentry didn't look surprised. He didn't even look at the paper. Instead, he reached into his folder and pulled out a completely different stack of papers, sliding them across the smooth mahogany table. "That is very interesting," Mr. Gentry said, his voice flat and professional. "Because when Apex Financial fired Darian Shaw last week, Mr. Shaw decided he did not want to face federal charges alone. He surrendered his company's cell phone to the corporate compliance team. We received the data logs yesterday." Kaylin stopped breathing. The only sound in the room was the soft hum of the air vents. "I have 84 text messages between you and Mr. Shaw," Mr. Gentry continued, tapping the paper. "Would you like me to read them? Or should I just skip to the one from October 13th, sent at 4:10 p.m., right before the forgery occurred?" The new lawyer stopped holding his pen. He looked at Kaylin, his eyes wide. "Kaylin, what is he talking about?" Mr. Gentry picked up the paper and read out loud. "From Kaylin Sterling, I forwarded you her secure login link. Just push the digital stamp and the fake e-notary seal through, Darian. Tamsin is too busy cleaning teeth all day to notice the email change. Once it's signed, the title company will consider the funds legally ours. We get the cash tomorrow, and we can quietly amend the deed back to her name next year after my business takes off. She's totally clueless. Mom is handling her." The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. There was no magical escape. There was no legal loophole. Kaylin had dug his own grave with his own thumbs, and his friend had pushed him into it to save himself. The cheap lawyer slowly closed his briefcase. The loud click echoed in the silent room. "I cannot represent you," the lawyer said, standing up. His face was bright red. "You lied to me. You told me you had a verbal agreement. This is premeditated wire fraud. I am withdrawing as your counsel immediately." "Wait, you can't just leave," Kaylin yelled, jumping out of his chair. His voice cracked, high and terrified. But the lawyer was already walking out the glass door, not looking back. Kaylin spun around, his chest heaving. He looked at Mr. Gentry, then at me. His eyes were wild, darting around the room for a way out. It wasn't my idea, Kalen suddenly shouted, his voice echoing off the glass walls. He pointed a shaking finger right at our mother. It was her. She hated the apartment. She said she deserved a nicer house. She told Tamsin was too weak to fight back, so we should just take it. She pushed me into the loan. My mother's head snapped up. Her mouth fell open in pure, silent horror. She stared at the golden boy, the son she had sacrificed everything for, the son she had thrown me away for. When the trap finally snapped shut, Kalen didn't protect her. He didn't try to shield her. He threw her directly in front of the train without a single second of hesitation. The shiny porcelain crown completely shattered. The decay underneath was finally out in the open for everyone to see. My mother began to weep. It wasn't her usual manipulative, gentle crying. It was a deep, ugly, broken sobbing. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking violently. I looked at Kalen. He was breathing hard, staring at the table, completely alone in his panic. Then, I looked at Mr. Gentry. I gave him a small, polite nod. "I think we are finished here," I said, my voice quiet and perfectly steady. I stood up, picked up my coat, and walked toward the door. I didn't look back at the crying woman or the broken man. For the first time in my life, I was breathing purely for myself. The heavy glass doors of First Bank slid shut behind me, completely cutting off the sounds of the lobby. I stepped out onto the sidewalk of 17th Street. The Denver snowstorm was in full force now. Huge, thick white flakes were falling from the gray sky, piling up on the roofs of parked cars and freezing against my eyelashes. I didn't button my coat right away. I just stood there on the concrete, letting the freezing wind hit my face. For the first time in 32 years, I didn't feel cold. I felt entirely awake. Inside that warm, mahogany-paneled room, my mother was weeping. A month ago, the sound of her crying would have sent a spike of pure panic straight through my heart. I would have rushed to her side. I would have apologized for things I didn't even do, just to make her stop. I would have drained my own bank account, handed over the keys to the trust, and begged her to tell me how to fix it. But today, standing in the snow, my chest was completely still. I listened to the rhythm of my own breathing, in, out, slow and steady. The invisible strings she had used to control me since I was a little girl were permanently cut. Kalen had held the knife, but my mother had guided his hand. They had built a perfect, comfortable life on top of my silent obedience, and the moment I stood up, their whole world collapsed. I started walking down the block toward the light rail station. The snow crunched loudly under my black winter boots. I thought about Kalen. Tomorrow, or maybe the day after, federal investigators would knock on the door of his rented apartment. First Bank wasn't going to let a forged commercial loan application slide just because he was crying in a conference room. His fake marketing company was dead. His bank accounts were locked. He was going to spend the next 5 years of his life sitting in courtrooms, paying legal fees he couldn't afford, and trying to explain why he thought he was smarter than the federal banking system. And my mother? She would have to go back to her small 2-bedroom apartment. She would have to cancel the custom paint colors and the expensive furniture orders. She would spend her days trying to comfort the son who had completely betrayed her to save his own skin. They were trapped in the very cage they had tried to lock me in. So, I will ask you this, and I genuinely want to know. If the ones who depend on you committed fraud just to cut you out, would you keep protecting them, or would you finally let them face the federal consequences alone? Let me know below. I read everyone. I swiped my transit card and stepped onto the warm, brightly lit train. I took a seat by the window, watching the snowy city blur past. By 11:30 a.m. I was walking back through the front doors of Smiles Dental. The familiar smell of mint polish and sterile wipes wrapped around me like a warm blanket. Elara was at the front desk, fighting with the same jammed printer. She wore a bright yellow sweater today. When she heard the door chime, she spun around in her rolling chair. Her eyes scanned my face, searching for any sign of tears or panic. I stopped at the edge of the counter. I looked at her, and a small, genuine smile slowly spread across my face. Elara's shoulders instantly dropped. She let out a massive, shaky breath and threw her hands up in the air. "Thank God," she whispered loudly. "I have been staring at this stupid printer for 2 hours, pretending to work. Did they sign the papers? Did the bank clear you?" "The bank cleared me," I said, my voice feeling lighter than it had in years. Kalen tried to blame Mom. The lawyer quit on the spot. Elara's jaw dropped. She stood up, walked around the tall desk, and wrapped her arms around my shoulders in a fierce, tight hug. She smelled like vanilla and coffee. I hugged her back, feeling the solid, unquestioning support in her grip. This was the woman who had spent hours digging through server logs just to make sure I wasn't robbed. She didn't share my last name. We didn't share a childhood. but she had fought for my survival when my own blood had thrown me to the wolves. "Tamsin," a deep, gravelly voice called out. I pulled back from Alara and looked down the hallway. Leander was standing in the doorway of his small office. He held a ceramic mug of black coffee, and his gray hair was messy, as usual. He didn't smile, but his tired eyes were soft. He gave me a single, firm nod of respect. "The trust account is fully secured, Leander," I called out to him. "The $2.4 million is locked and safe under my name alone." "Good," Leander said simply. "Make sure you invest it somewhere boring. No marketing companies." I laughed. It was a real, bright sound that echoed down the clinic hallway. Dr. Eris poked his head out of room 2, holding a tiny mouth mirror. "Tamsin, are you back?" Dr. Eris asked, smiling through his blue surgical mask. "Mrs. Cresswell is here for her 12:30 appointment. She brought us homemade snickerdoodle cookies." "I'm right here, Dr. Eris," I said, taking off my heavy winter coat and hanging it on the hook behind the desk. "I'll go set up her tray." I walked into room 3. I washed my hands in the small stainless steel sink, watching the warm water run over my knuckles. For months, my thumbs and joints had ached with a deep, throbbing pain. I always thought it was from holding the dental tools too tightly, but as I dried my hands on a paper towel, I realized the pain was completely gone. The physical weight of carrying my family's lies had literally left my bones. I snapped my blue rubber gloves over my wrists. I adjusted the bright overhead light. I felt incredibly grounded, standing exactly where I was supposed to be. Thursday, December 24th, 2023, 6 p.m. Outside my apartment window, Denver was completely silent, blanketed in a thick, undisturbed layer of fresh, white snow. Inside, my small kitchen was alive with heat and the deep, rich smell of roasting garlic and rosemary. I stood by the oven, wearing a pair of faded jeans and an oversized gray sweater. I hummed quietly to the soft jazz music playing from my small radio on the counter. For the first time in 7 years, I was not spending the holidays sitting in a stiff, formal dining room, carefully measuring every word I said. I was not watching Kaylin open expensive gifts paid for by my overtime shifts. I was not listening to my mother complain about how the turkey was slightly dry and how nobody appreciated her sacrifices. I walked over to my small wooden dining table. It was set for 3. In the center of the table rested a thick, crisp white envelope. It had arrived in the mail yesterday from First Bank. I ran my finger over the embossed logo. The letter inside was incredibly boring, and it was the most beautiful thing I had ever read. It was the final, official confirmation from the bank's legal department. The Sterling Family Trust was permanently locked under a new, highly secure commercial account. The $2.4 million was sitting safely in a steady, low-risk index fund. It wasn't going to buy a huge house in Cherry Creek. It wasn't going to fund a fake marketing business. It was just going to sit there, quietly keeping me safe. There was a small article on the 4th page of the Denver Business Journal 2 days ago. It was just a tiny paragraph. It stated that federal regulators were officially investigating Apex Financial for internal wire fraud, and multiple employees had been subpoenaed by a grand jury. Kaylin was not in jail today. White-collar justice moved slowly, but his life as the golden boy was completely over. His business was dissolved. His credit was a black hole. He was currently living on the small, lumpy pull-out sofa in my mother's cramped apartment, waiting for the federal prosecutors to formally file the charges. My mother was finally getting exactly what she had fought so hard for. She had her son all to herself, 24 hours a day, in a tiny space with no money and no one else to blame. The doorbell rang, a loud, cheerful buzz that broke my thoughts. I opened the front door. Alara stood in the hallway, wrapped in a giant red winter coat. Her nose was bright pink from the cold, and she was carefully balancing a massive, slightly burnt apple pie in her hands. "I fought with the oven," Alara announced, marching right past me and setting the pie on the kitchen counter. "And the oven won, but I brought vanilla ice cream to cover up the burnt crust, so we are going to survive this." I laughed, taking her heavy coat and hanging it on the hook. "It smells perfect, Alara." A minute later there was a quiet, firm knock on the door. I opened it to find Leander. He wore a heavy wool overcoat, but he still had ink stains on the cuffs of his shirt. He held a bottle of sparkling apple cider in one hand and a thin manila folder in the other. "Merry Christmas, Tamsin," Leander said, his voice deep and warm. He handed me the folder. "I brought you a present. It's a 1099 tax form for the new trust account. You need to sign it by January 15th. "You really know how to bring the holiday magic, Leander," Alara called out from the kitchen, tossing him a cloth napkin. Leander chuckled, a rare, genuine sound, and took off his coat. We sat around the small wooden table. We ate the roasted chicken. We ate the burnt pie. The apartment was filled with loud stories about difficult dental patients, missing insurance codes, and Alara's terrible cooking skills. Nobody sighed heavily. Nobody rolled their eyes. Nobody expected me to sit quietly in the corner and just serve the food. I looked at Alara, who was laughing so hard she had to wipe away a tear. I looked at Leander, who was carefully explaining a boring tax law while smiling. I looked down at my own hands resting on the table. The joints were completely relaxed. The painful, tight rubber band feeling was a distant memory. Later that night, after they had gone home into the snow, I stood by the kitchen sink washing the dishes. The apartment was quiet again, but it wasn't a lonely quiet. It was a peaceful, steady calm. My phone, resting on the counter, suddenly lit up. The screen glowed softly in the dim light. It was a notification from my voicemail app. A blocked number had left a 3-minute message. I didn't need to check the caller ID. I knew exactly who it was. I knew exactly how her voice would sound. The gentle, manipulative crying, the desperate apologies, the quiet demands for me to fix the massive, terrifying legal storm that was currently sitting in her living room. I dried my hands on a soft cotton towel. I picked up the phone. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel a sudden rush of sadness or guilt. I just felt a deep, overwhelming sense of reality. The woman on the other end of that phone was a stranger who had simply worn a mask with my mother's face on it. I tapped the screen. I highlighted the voicemail. Without listening to a single second of it, I pressed delete. The red dot disappeared. The screen went completely dark, leaving only my own reflection in the glass. I smiled, turned off the kitchen light, and walked away. Thank you for staying with me through this whole story. If any part of it hit close to home, if you've ever been the glue holding a toxic family together while being treated like a burden, I see you. Drop a comment and tell me your story. I read every single one, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming next. There's another story linked in the description about someone who survived the ultimate corporate betrayal and turned the tables on their boss in the most satisfying way. I will see you there.